Welcome back. 10:12 on this Wednesday morning. Conversations with Centerstone continue. Stacy is the VP of Clinical Services, and good morning. Happy Wednesday to you. How are we doing?
Good morning. I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing great. And, you know, it's just been great keeping up these conversations with Centerstone and really just learning more and more about the great services that you guys offer. And I know today that we'll be talking about a few different ones, and really excited about that. And, you know, as we go right into this conversation, take us through your background and your day-to-day at Centerstone a little bit.
Sure. I actually started at Centerstone about 10 years ago, and I was a counselor originally. I worked with dual diagnosis clients, so individuals that had a mental health diagnosis and substance use diagnosis. And then I also worked with people in our medication-assisted treatment program, so they were dosing on methadone or being prescribed Suboxone. So since my time at Centerstone, I've just kind of grown in my roles. So I've added a few more service lines that I oversee, and I think we're going to talk about those a little bit today.
Well, and now before we go and talk about those services, just I'm sure it's been great to see the evolution and the additions of some of these programs too along the way as you've built and grown with the company, it seems like.
Absolutely. Like one just small example is our methadone dosing clinic in Alton has more than doubled since I've been there. When I started 10 years ago, we had a very extensive wait list with hundreds of people seeking services. And I can say that happily today, we have no wait list.
Wow.
And you can access services within the first day or so that you contact us.
It's just incredible. And, you know, let's start talking about some of those services. You know, I think the one that I think we should start out with first is that IOP, that intensive outpatient service that's offered. Take me through that. What's this one all about?
Sure. So we've offered IOP services for a while, but we did a revamp of the program within the last year. So intensive outpatient services is for somebody with a substance use diagnosis, and they are typically either stepping down from a residential treatment center and need additional support in their integration back into the community, or maybe they're struggling and they're living in a community, but they can't go to residential treatment. So we increase the level of service that we're providing them. In intensive outpatient, people typically come generally to group counseling, sometimes individual as well, for 9 or more hours every week.
Oh, wow. Well, and now, see, that's what I love about a lot of Centerstone's programs, and really all of them, is the fact that it's a partnership between that individual and with Centerstone. And there's work that has to be put in on both sides to be successful. But if we, you know, have a drop, or maybe we kind of, slip and fall a little bit, you guys are there whenever we're ready to go and start that journey again.
Absolutely. And, you know, client agreement and participation is the key to success, right? So we want to help them with what they're willing to do.
Well, and now it seems like, too, with this intensive outpatient program, that it's a great way to kind of have a step down from maybe some of the more of the involved programs that maybe we come to know and come to think about. You know, I think this is a great step down. And as you see somebody go from maybe a residential to an IOP, take me through that transition. What do you kind of notice just from maybe an administrator standpoint or that clinician standpoint when you're seeing somebody really hit that transitionary stage and ready to thrive?
I think the biggest thing that we've recognized is that we needed a level of support that was in between, right? So someone goes to residential treatment and they're receiving 25 hours of treatment every single week. They have a program every single hour of every single day. And then they're going right back into the community, and we needed a middle land, right? Most people were doing outpatient services that was 1 hour or a couple hours of group. But we've seen a lot higher rate of success when we increase that level of support as they transition from that residential treatment back into the community, their everyday life, the everyday stressors, right? Employment, kids, whatever that might be.
Well, and honestly, I think that's so important because to me, it seems like, and this is just my perspective or my interpretation of it, is about routines and having a schedule. And whenever you're getting back into an open field, so to speak, after coming down from a residential program, coming back from one, it's going to take some time. And so to have somebody there to give us some structure, because I need it more than anybody if I'm going through that, that helps to me in so many more ways than, an hour or two, maybe every other week or once a week to try to keep going.
Absolutely. And what you said is really important, the structure, right? They go from a very intensive structure, and typically people that are in active addiction or trying to lead their life in recovery, they have to change everything.
Yeah.
Right. So you might go back home, but it might be a different home because you can't live in the original place that you were residing at. You change your people, places, and things, right? That might mean your job. It might mean your family. It might mean your friends. So we need to increase the level of support that individuals have from residential to outpatient in the community setting.
Well, and now as we transition here and talking a little bit more about the MAT, the medication assisted treatment, do some of these programs go hand in hand with each other, like an MAT with an IOP and so forth?
Yes, absolutely. I can give you a couple of examples with that. So if we have somebody that's attending our methadone treatment program or Suboxone program, typically they might start at receiving that medication and receiving, like we talked about before, 1 or a couple hours of outpatient counseling. If we see that's not working for them, we can always increase the level of care, right? So that might mean if they can't leave their home, they have children, they have a job that they need to sustain, that maybe they can go into intensive outpatient in order to help support them in establishing their recovery. It also works very hand in hand with, we have a residential treatment site in Anna, Illinois, Fellowship House. And so some folks that are in our methadone dosing program in Marion or Alton will then go to residential treatment in Anna. We continue their medication. They can get stable in that program and then reintegrate within the community.
Well, and we've had the fellowship program, the fellowship house on the show before, and we've talked about it. And I think it's just a fantastic opportunity for so many people that are able to be a part of it and really have just some great opportunities to grow and really tackle this in such a beautiful setting too, out in nature, and then around people that are in that same circumstance. And I think that's really important. And with medication assisted treatment, when does that start, or how early could it start? I think is the question there.
It really can start at any time. So sometimes people start in residential treatment and then decide they need that medication component of it. So we can initiate them on Suboxone treatment or methadone, whichever we feel like is the best for them and that they would like to be a part of. And when I say these medication assisted treatment, those are specific for opiate use disorders.
Yeah.
And then we also have people that, may walk in today and they're interested in starting a medication. And so we try to do that as quickly as possible. And I'd like to say within the first day or two, we can start them on a small dose, and then we do a titration schedule up until they feel stable.
Well, and that's what I was curious about, is just that timeline on that MAT and what that looks like. And I think so many people maybe have not a false interpretation, but maybe just an interpretation that doesn't really mirror what that program looks like. When you say whenever they're stable or they feel stable, is that just dependent on that individual, or are there some guidelines that you guys have to kind of follow along as well?
It's very individualized.
Okay.
Because like when you think about medication in general, right? Like I might have to take 1 Advil and it helps my headache, but you may have to take 2 Advil to address your headache. So when we talk about methadone and Suboxone treatment specifically, we look at withdrawal symptoms and cravings. Mm-hmm. And so we know if they're experiencing withdrawal symptoms, it does mean that their dose needs to increase. So we start them off at a low dose. We do assessments overall to determine if we feel like an increase is needed, as well as their report. And then we change their dose based on those measures. Very
fascinating. And thanks for the insights on that. I just know that that's something that folks could be curious about. And one thing I wanted to hit on too is your guys' substance use disorder treatment facilities that are available too, like the Fellowship House and the Recovery Transitional House, which again, I think is another great facility. Take me through those two, and then afterwards we can also talk about some of your guys' coordinators too.
Absolutely. So we have been working to develop the entire continuum of care for substance use. So someone can come into our residential treatment center in Anna, start in our detox services, move to that 28-day program. And then from there, maybe they don't think that IOP is a higher enough structured and supportive level of care, or maybe they're homeless and they don't have anywhere to go, they can move to our transitional living facility, which is in Marion, Illinois. And so you have to think that that's a little bit of a step down for them, but it is a 24-hour staff facility that we have clinical staff on staff, excuse me, and then we also have recovery support specialists. So there's people there to support them in their recovery. It's an extended stay, right? So they can be there anywhere from 3 to 6 months, and we're helping people get stabilized. So that might mean they're developing new friendships, they're obtaining employment. Maybe they don't know how to apply for a job, or they've never rented an apartment before. So the objective is to extend the length of residential supported treatment, and then they can reintegrate back into the community after that, whenever they feel comfortable, really. But it's typically about 6 months.
Well, and that's why I love the wraparound approach that you guys have, because it's not just, the end point is getting us, back into the regular pattern of life and battling that substance. It's also getting us prepared to go through life, because, so many times, and we've had these conversations with you all before, is you realize with your patients and clients is that, medications that were needed for our health, our physical health, maybe weren't followed, or we didn't go see a primary care provider in 10 years or 5 years or put the date on it. And so to go and have those steps and have that transition and to really give us skills and tools to be successful, I mean, that to me is the full package.
Absolutely. And you really nailed it on the head there, as far as you have to think that somebody that has been living in an active addiction and potentially have lost several aspects of their life, meeting their friends, their family, their employment, things like that. Do you think that they're addressing their physical health issues? No, they're not. And so when we get into recovery, then we have to address all those things, right? So we definitely support treating the whole person.
Well, and now when it comes to your coordinators, when it pertains to drug court, I always find this a really great aspect of what you guys are all about too, because this is really a great, you guys really are known for this, really, when it comes to these coordinators and the process you have for the folks that utilize them.
Absolutely. So we have a drug court coordinator. It's in our southern counties of Illinois, so Williamson, Franklin, and Jackson County. And that individual helps people move into that program and then support their recovery. So an individual might be facing a criminal charge that would be sentenced to prison. And that doesn't necessarily rehabilitate them, right? So they follow an intensive program for, I've seen up to 2 years. I think sometimes it's a year or 18 months. And if they complete that program successfully with the support of counseling and the legal system, I think that they can have those charges waived from their record.
I think that's just so important. And really, because of how many times you look at the recidivism charts that come out from a national level, and you realize that a lot of these are drug charges that really should, be handled in a different way, like with what you guys are doing with these coordinators. It's really important. One thing I wanted to hit on at the end is the DUI services that you offer, because I didn't know that you guys offer this. So I'm learning something new for the first time today. Fill me in on this if you could.
Yeah, so if someone gets a DUI, they have to come in for an evaluation. And with that evaluation, we make recommendations. So if it's, a one-time mistake, I made a bad decision to drive after I was drinking, then you might be recommended for some risk education. But then we might have people that, have a chronic and alcohol use disorder that have made some mistakes a couple of times. And with that, we would recommend a higher level of treatment. So we do the evaluation, and then we recommend treatment based on the evaluation, and then they can complete that treatment with us as well. And then we give those recommendations back to the Secretary of State in order for them to be considered for reinstatement of license.
That's really fascinating. And honestly, it seems like, with this too, that individual, if you have to go through that, the journey that is if you're honest about it too, I'm sure if you go in for that, DUI assessment, and you go through and talk about it and say, this is the first time I was caught, but let's be honest, I've kind of done this a few times and haven't gotten caught. You're helping yourself more than you realize, because you're able to really start talking about maybe the issue that you're facing or why you're doing it. And I think that that's really an important note too.
Absolutely.
Well, and now how important is it going into that conversation of transparency, and honesty with that clinician, with whatever service we're talking about? We've talked about so many of them today, and with that individual, because I know that, sometimes maybe there's an overshare or two. I don't know how that works, but I think sometimes just because we're all human, we go in and say, well, I'm going to, make sure that I'm presenting this front today, or I'm going to go into my, counseling service and, for the first time. And this is what I want to address. And I think when we do that, we put up barriers for growth when it comes to our mental health, and we start to almost root ourselves in that reality, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, honesty really is key, right? But in the counseling setting, it's also important to develop a relationship so someone would feel comfortable telling me the things that they might not necessarily want to admit. That might not happen early on. But truthfully, to move through a recovery and to make sustainable changes, honesty is going to have to happen there.
Well, and see, that's why I think your clinicians and your staff is so good at what they do, because they work on those partnerships, and everyone at Centerstone values them. And that's what wants me to bring to my last point, is the fact that you guys take care of your staff. And we were talking with a few throughout the year about, the stressors that are on your staff because of, the situations that they're helping, manage, and some of the things that they hear throughout the day. And, how important is the morale of a staff when it comes to what you guys do? Because it seems like if you have an unhappy person, that service could, in that session, could go pretty wonky.
Yeah, absolutely. How can I help someone else if I'm not being honest myself, like we just talked about, right? Or not taking care of myself. So we definitely try to, we talk about some heavy stuff, right? So we try to offer the opportunity to staff to meet with supervisors, meet as a group, consult as needed, take time as needed, and know when you really need a break.
Mm-hmm. And Stacy, before I let you go, we'd be remiss not to point out that September 6th is the Life Story Run and Walk, and that's going to be up in Marion, correct?
There is Marion, and there's a satellite location going on in Godfrey.
Oh, really cool. And we'll make sure to link that as well. And before I let you go, is there anything else you want the public or the region to know about today about Centerstone?
I just want people to know that there's always people there to help them. We welcome people to walk in. There's no issue too small, even if it's just a session or two, or if it's something that's been going on for a while. Please seek us out if you need help.
Absolutely. Stacy, it was great talking with you. I hope you have a great rest of your Wednesday.
Thank you. You too.
We'll take a quick break. More Daily Show with Lacey McDonald joining us next right after this on RiverBender.com.